Welcome to the Women Leaders Association podcast, where we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. Be sure to tune in each week to hear an empowering message from the world's top women executives, trailblazers, entrepreneurs, and all-around fierce female leaders. I'm your host, Julianne Kirkland, and I will be taking you on a deep dive of each message to equip you with the principles, strategies, and tools you need to start crushing your goals, increasing your impact, creating work-life harmony, and did I mention have more fun? Because when you love what you do it better. The Women Leaders Association is the world's largest women executives association with over 30,000 women in executive and leadership positions who are committed to the development and advancement of women in the corporate arena. If you would like to get involved in a Women Leaders Association chapter, would enjoy daily podcasts, or you desire to become a part of the Women's Mastermind group near you, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com. Now let's tune in for this incredible message.
On today's episode, Elise Holzman, a former practicing attorney, certified executive coach, and the founder of The Lawyer's Edge, where she and her coaching team work with law firms to grow thriving businesses by helping lawyers become better business developers and leaders. Listen in as she discusses the importance of meaningful change.
Welcome, Elise. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm thrilled to be here, Julianne. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we were just chatting before, we pressed record, and she mentioned that I had quadruplets, and I said, one of the biggest lessons that taught me was the ability that we really have, right? Our capacity is so much greater than what we think or imagine it would be possible for, and as I was kind of reading your bio this morning and all that you do for the Lawyer's Edge, and we're going to get into that, but you talked about meaningful change. And I'm just so curious as your experience in, working with lawyers and different attorneys and trying to really bring about meaningful change in this world, what was your original perception of what was possible for you? And then what have you realized that you were actually far more capable to achieve because of it?
That's such a great question because I was always kind of on a straight and narrow path. I did well in school, so I was encouraged to go to a top university. I went to a great university. So then I wound up going to a great law school. And it's funny because I was actually pre-med in college almost the entire time. I wanted to do something meaningful in medicine, and then ultimately determined that actually wasn't really the best fit for me. And so I was just on this path where everything was easy and simple, not easy in terms of doing it, but the decisions were easy, right? And then you get out of law school and I went into a big firm and I had all these loans to pay back. And at some point you start to realize, it's not just a cookie cutter path anymore, right? I have to figure out what it is that I want to do and be. And so I wound up grudgingly leaving the practice of law. That's a long story involving, pulling all-nighters and being married to a lawyer at a big firm. We were big firms in New York City and doing the crazy hours. I mean, if you ever watch a bad movie about lawyers and law firms, you'll see that kind of
You're like, that was it. That's what I was doing.
That was literally the life we were living. And so, we had a child and we never saw the kid and, all of that sort of thing. And so ultimately I wound up being at home with my children for 10 years, which I never expected was going to happen. I was very much on a career path. And I think I identified very much with that. That was who I saw myself as being. And then I was home with kids for a long time. So I had to reinvent myself there a little bit. And when it was time to go back to work, I thought about going back to the law because I actually really loved it. But I also didn't want to turn my life over to a law firm again. I wanted to have control over my time. And so I didn't know it was possible for me. It was almost like there was nothing else out there. Well, if I'm not going to practice law, what am I going to do? And it was at that time that I found out about executive and leadership coaching. And it sounded like something that might be a good fit for me, that I was interested in exploring. And I discovered a whole new world. And at the time, I thought, okay, I'm going to start my own business so that again, I can control my own schedule because by then I had 3 children, one of whom has some significant special needs, and we didn't have family around. So I wanted to make sure that I could be flexible. But this idea of growing a thriving business, it never even occurred to me because I don't come from entrepreneurs, right? My mother always worked for a school system. My father always worked for a company. And so entrepreneurial, I just wasn't one of those people who had that entrepreneurial spirit and thought I could do it. And so over time, I've discovered that there are certain things that I absolutely love and that I think I'm pretty good at and I get some good feedback on, and that I'm able to help make meaningful change or help others make meaningful change for themselves. And so
Yeah.
while I don't have this delusion that I can get out there and change the entire world, I feel that what I've learned that I love to do is to help individuals make change for themselves so that they can truly live the lives that they want to live. And if you had told me, 20 years ago that that's what I would be doing, I would have thought you were crazy because
Right.
I
No, I'm
just knew that,
not.
you just go practice law and then that's the end of that.
Right. Wow, that's so good. And it's so funny. I was talking to a lady this morning about a mastermind program that we have. And she was like, I don't really have that entrepreneurial spirit. She's been a nurse by trade, and now she's working in compliance, and she just turned 50. And she's like, I'm trying to kind of figure out what's next, like if this isn't going to be it, like what's next for me. And I think so many people, they feel like, right, they're checking the boxes just like you did. Okay, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. And we tend to silo our lives. Like, okay, we show up this way in the law firm, we show up this way at home, we show up this way with our spouse. And we're missing so much of, again, what we're fully capable of and that meaningful part of us, right? When we aren't willing to take a step back and be like, wait a second, I can apply all of who I am in all of these areas. And I think you as a coach and me as a coach, like we have the ability to see that in other people that maybe don't yet for themselves. And that's the beautiful thing about working with a coach.
I think some of it comes with age because I think that when you've been around the block a few times, you start to see that you can do different things in different parts of your life, and that what made you who you are in your 20s, let's say, doesn't have to be what makes you who you are in your 30s. At our core, we are who we are, but it doesn't mean that we can't learn and that we can't grow and that we can't
Right.
shed some
Evolve.
of the
Yeah.
nonsense that we took on from
Right.
other people when we were growing up. Right. And so, yeah, I think that people are so much more capable than they think that they are. And, you and I talked about this as well before, because you certainly weren't planning on having quadruplets, but you rose
Right.
to the occasion, and you learned that, you could actually keep these little critters alive and thriving and all of those sorts of things. And I wasn't planning on having a child with significant special needs, but you rise to the occasion. And so if we can do that when challenging things come up, then certainly we should be able to do those things when opportunities are there. And sometimes we're just so afraid to take that on, because of the messages that we've received growing up of what's appropriate
Yes.
or
Yes.
inappropriate, or
Yes.
what people in this family do, or what your
Yeah.
parents expect of you. And so I think that over time it's easier to shed those things. And it's also, as you mentioned, easier to shed those things when you're talking to somebody about it who can help you see
Right.
what's hard for you to see yourself.
Right. And as you were talking about that, and I'm remembering about what you put in your bio about the double-edged sword of perfectionism, and how, and I just, as you were talking just then, I was like, man, that's so true. We believe these stories that we've grown up with, in our surroundings, and a lot of them I call just straight up lies. Like most of them are just lies that we believe that become limiting beliefs in what we are able to achieve, right? And so often I work with a lot of high achievers and high performers, and that idea of perfectionism, that's it's not, it's elusive. Like there is no such thing as being perfect. So talk a little bit about your experience with perfectionism.
I have always known that that I have a perfectionistic streak in me, and I was curious about the concept of it when I saw a TED talk by a woman named Reshma Saujani. So Reshma Saujani, you may have heard of Girls Who Code. She started Girls Who Code, and she did a TED talk many years ago and also wrote a book called Brave, Not Perfect. It was that book and her TED talk that made me start thinking much more deeply about this and how it impacts all of us, particularly women, and particularly high achieving women. And so, what she says, and I believe it to be true, is that even to this day, boys and girls are socialized differently, right? We know that that's what happens in our culture. And, it's funny because when my son was born, and I had two daughters before that, I remember my aunt came to the hospital and she even said, from the first day, you're talking to them differently. The girls, it's like sweetie and beautiful and gorgeous and all that. And the boys, it's like, buddy. And
Right. Hey,
it's just
bud.
like hey, buddy, it's just a different conversation. And so what Reshma Saujani says is that girls are socialized to be polite, right? Be clean. Your nails are clean. You look pretty. You're organized. You say yes to everybody. You're polite to teachers. You don't talk back. I mean, I totally talked back, but you don't talk back, right? You're supposed to do really well in school, neat and clean, all of those things, the kind of person that somebody would like to bring home to their mom. In short, we're socialized to be perfect. Whereas boys are socialized to jump off the top of the monkey bars, right? And get dirty and play in the mud and take risks and even break the rules sometimes, right? Because after all, boys will be boys. And so the thing is that really has an impact on us as we are growing up. Some of it, and why I call it the double-edged sword of perfectionism, is that some of it's actually good, right? So when we're young, all of that perfectionism actually earns us rewards. Because let's say you do get the straight A's, you do well in school, your parents are proud of you, they brag about you to the aunts and uncles and the grandparents. The teachers choose you for clubs or leadership positions. You do well in school, so then you go on to perhaps higher education or whatever it is you're meant to be doing. And even when you land your first job, right, you're doing a great job and people like you. You're dotting the I's, you're crossing the T's, you're doing all of that stuff. Where I think the double-edged sword comes in is that at some point that starts to shift. And so as we become more senior, as we start to take on leadership positions, we sometimes get ourselves in trouble because all of the things that leadership requires, or many of the things that leadership requires, I should say, are things that we really haven't been practicing, right? Things like big vision thinking and not worrying about all the details, taking risks, being willing to be wrong, right? Being willing to be the bad guy, right? Not getting stuck in the weeds, saying no to people and maybe disappointing them. Those are not things that we've been practicing. And that's what leaders need to do. So, what person wakes up in the morning at age, 30 or 35 or 40 and says, you know what? I would like to become a leader in my organization. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out all the stuff I've been doing that's made me successful for the last 40 years and try something completely different, right? Nobody does that. And so it becomes really hard for us to give that up. And so I think that, and listen, to your point, and I talk about perfectionism to large groups on a regular basis, and I will ask the question, by a show of hands, how many of you in this room think that it's possible for a human being to be perfect? Well, obviously not one hand in the room goes up. And yet, look at all of us running around trying to pursue perfection.
Right.
You know that it's literally impossible.
Right.
So I think the perfectionism thing is a real challenge for people, and it's very, very hard to give up because we do become, particularly women, I think, but I don't want to overgeneralize, but I've seen this a lot with women, and particularly professional women. We do become people pleasers, and that's how we've gotten ahead, and it's worked, but then it stops working, and it's it's like a rude awakening.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about leadership and waking up, and it's like the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and the big push for it in corporations, and I'm all for it. I get it. And at the same time, like, we got to go back to schools. Like, we've got to go back to where these kids are learning these behaviors and habits and things like that, and really start to instill those leadership principles of like, hey, yes, you need a to-do list. You also need a not to-do list. Like, you need to know what boundaries are, and you need to know how to respect your own boundaries. You need to know how to honor your word. You need to, like, that should be started way back when we're young. And I think because I have 4 that are the same age, I'm like keenly attuned to how much they compare themselves. And I get a lot of, like, one of the quads, the first one, he is very, very good at swimming. Like, it comes very naturally to him. He's top. He does great. So he was at the top. He led the practice the other day, and he got in the car and was excited and told me about it. And the other ones are in the car too. And I was like, oh man, that's great, buddy. I'm so proud of you. That's awesome that you work so hard, and you're getting to see those benefits and all that. And every single one of them, the rest of the 3 were like, well, what about me? Do I do good? And I'm like, yes. Here's the thing, guys. I can compliment somebody else and not have to compliment you as well.
Yeah.
That's a hard pill.
It's hard. First of all, I mean, this parenting gig, it's, it's not for the faint of heart.
White
As
flags everywhere.
yeah, as any parent knows, right? It's not for the faint of heart. And also, everybody comes out with their own personality and they've got their own thing. And the comparisons start so young. I saw it very early on with my girls. Coming home at ages that I didn't even think that they could be thinking about this and worrying about what their bodies looked like and that sort of thing. I mean, this stuff is absolutely awful. And so I think that what I would say to people is, look, we're all part of society. You're not going to suddenly stop socializing your kids in a way that makes sense for society. And at the same time, I think it's important for us to be aware of what we're messaging, to our kids, but also to other people that we're working with, right? Are you treating people with respect? Are you treating them, as equally as possible?
Yeah.
And to your point about the story about the swimming, I mean, it's funny because I remember before my second child was born, I said something to my father about treating them the same. And he said, full stop, you can't treat them the same.
Stop.
And I was like, what do you mean? You have to treat, I mean, first of all, I knew nothing. I'm the oldest child in my family, in both sides of the family. I'm the oldest child in my generation. So I was the first to do everything. It's amazing that my children can actually function in society because I really didn't know what I was doing at all. But he said, you can't because they're just different. Right. Yeah. And that's the issue. So this stuff is also complicated. But I think that when we are aware of how we've been shaped and the messages that we've received, to your point, it's lies. Like so much of it is lies. And you have to figure out what's true for you.
Yeah.
And not worry about, and again, as you get older, it gets easier. Because I think you just start to care less. You recognize there are 8 billion people on this planet and not all of them are going to approve of what you do. And so you might as well just do what's right for you. But I do think that at least having these conversations, in the workplace and with our children, I think is important so that they have the awareness and, you can't fix what you aren't aware of. Yes. And I think so many of us are doing these things unconsciously. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to torture ourselves. We're just doing these things unconsciously because we don't know any better. We don't realize what kinds of impacts these messages have had on us. Right. So it's not easy to shift the mindset, but I think that it's worth the effort.
Yeah.
If it's getting in your way.
Absolutely. So what's, as an executive coach and the people that you help and you speak to and all that, what is, one practical piece of advice that you would give somebody to, who maybe was listening to this podcast and they're like, oh my gosh, like now they're having all these, revelations and these aha moments of like, oh, this makes so much sense. And what would be a starting point for them to kind of start to move this journey forward and that self-discovery and starting to really see what's possible for their life and what could be for them?
I mentioned, I think it's really important to be aware. And by the way, that doesn't mean flagellating yourself or getting angry at anybody else. It's not about laying blame, certainly not blaming yourself. It's not about, saying, my gosh, my parents were even more horrible than I thought they were.
Right. Like,
that's not what we're talking
parents,
about.
We're all just trying to survive.
Right. We're doing the
people.
best we can over here, people. But I think it really is about understanding that these messages are out there. 99% of them were well-intentioned. Right. So the messages that we've received, it's not like anybody was trying to do anything to us. They were trying to help us live our best lives. Right. So the awareness is first without blame, because we don't need that added stress and it's not helpful. Right. The second thing I would say is there are some actions that people can take. And, it depends on the person, what's going to be right for you. But I think one of the things that you can do is allow yourself to dream the dream. Allow yourself to think about, well, if there were no obstacles, what would I like to do? Yeah. Right. So if there were no obstacles, I would like to become a partner in my law firm. I would like to have my own business. I would like to travel the world and go to all the continents or whatever it may be. Even if you don't know what the path would look like yet, even if you can't believe that you could accomplish it, at least be willing to articulate what it is that you might want to do. And then I think that conducting what I call mini experiments is a really good idea. It's about taking small risks, right? So I'm not talking about the risk-taking equivalent of like jumping off the George Washington Bridge with a bungee cord attached to your ankle,
No.
right? If that's not for you, then it would not be for me. That's not what we're talking about here. We're really talking more about putting a toe out there, right? Getting outside your comfort zone a little bit. It doesn't have to be anything big, but once you see that you can do a couple of these things. So, for example, I have a lot of clients who would like to do some public speaking and get their names out there, but they're afraid to get up in front of a group. And it's not even necessarily the stage fright. For some, it is. A lot of times it's, well, I haven't been practicing for 30 years, and how can I call myself an expert? And why would anybody want to listen to me? And so I say, maybe don't have the spotlight on you. Maybe be on a panel, maybe moderate a panel so you can be the one asking the questions, but you just put your toe out there and try something a little bit different. And once you start having some small successes, it can add up to big things. I think another thing that people can do is look around and ask yourself, am I surrounding myself with other like-minded people, or am I hanging out, around the proverbial water cooler with the naysayers and the Debbie Downers? Because when you hang around with those people, they are going to convince you that you shouldn't try something new. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why would you do that? You're just
and they're all like well-intentioned, they're keeping it real with you.
They're keeping it real, but also it's more of a commentary on what is holding them back.
Exactly.
Than what should be holding you back. And look, there are people. I mean, when I first started my business, there was a woman in my neighborhood who I was friends with. I mean, we had this big group. It was actually my daughter's Girl Scout troop, and we would do these like just fun mom events from time to time. And there was a woman in this group who actually got angry at me, and I couldn't understand. It was like she was so angry at me for starting my own business. Why did she care? Right. And I remember being so upset about it at the time. She was just being sort of so mean, and everybody else was very encouraging. But why would I hang out with that person? Whatever's going on in her head is what's getting in the way. That really has nothing to do with me. And so, Jim Rohn, who has since passed, but is, and I see you nodding in recognition, right? One of the kind of the godfathers of the personal and professional development industry used to say, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Right. And so if you're spending time with people who are sucking the life out of you, dragging you down, telling you why you can't do something, telling you all the things that could go wrong, right. Maybe you're not hanging out with the right people. And, some people you can't get rid of. I mean, unfortunately, you might be living with somebody like that, right? But you can try to minimize their impact on you. And as I like to say, hang out with some badass people, right? Yeah. Hang out with people who are trying something cool or are open to change, or, maybe a little bit more Pollyanna than you think is even necessary. Right. But when you hang out with those people, you're going to be energized. You're going to be motivated. You're going to feel that you can see what's possible.
Yes. Oh, so good. Mic drop, everybody. It's so true. And just, what I've been shown kind of over this past year and the perspective shift that I've journeyed through is, instead of focusing on like-minded, is like-missioned. Because I have been around people that were on kind of the same mission of greater impact in this world and high influence and things like that, but had a different mindset than I did, had a different perspective that they held. And that, again, talking about expanding capacity earlier, that it really has helped me to see things from a new perspective and to enjoy all that life has to offer from all the stories of all of who we are, And so I love being around people that, maybe me 2 years ago would have argued with to like, I'm going to prove my point. And that's just kind of gone away now, at least for me. And it's so freeing to be in a conversation with somebody, even if we have completely different ideals about things, and just know that they have value. And if we are on the same mission to make ourselves better, the world around us better, like, I'm going to be able to find something that I can, join in with you on.
Right. I think that's right. And I like your distinction between like-minded and like-mission, because the thing is that like-minded is comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's reassuring. But, to your point, it can also keep us in a rut.
Yeah.
Because if everybody is thinking similarly, then we're just going to keep doing what we've always done and get the results we've always gotten.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, choose, and it's a choice. It's a conscious choice of putting yourself around certain people. If you can't find them at home or you can't find them in your office, maybe there's an organization that you can be involved with, or some kind of meetup, or
Yeah.
club or something like that, where you can find those people. And it doesn't mean that the people in your life that aren't that way are bad people. It just
Right.
means that they're not, on that particular topic, they're not going in the same direction that you are.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, this has been such a great conversation, Elise. What is one last piece of advice that you would give to the person listening right now that is just looking to start moving forward, like right now today? How can they connect with you? Do you recommend they go to a coach? I know you said, get involved in a group. We have a mastermind group with the Women Leaders Association, but how do you say, okay, step one, here you go?
I think it's really important to make sure that you're investing in yourself. And I don't mean money, I mean time. Because
Yeah.
for most women, I think for most people these days, but certainly for most women, time is at a premium. And I hear people all the time saying, oh, you know what? I just can't find time for that.
Yeah.
You're never going to find time, right?
Right.
You can schedule time, you can protect time. But what I also see happening with women is that we tend to put everybody else first. And
Mhm.
so getting started on a path that's going to be different for us, or pursuing something that you're really passionate about, can feel like a luxury. And so
Mhm.
what I would encourage people to do is to decide that it's not a luxury, because it's not. This is your life, right? We don't get
Right.
do-overs. At least I don't believe you do. And so now is the time to make up your mind. This is not a luxury. This is a necessity,
Yeah.
right? This is your life and you get to create it the way you want it to be.
Yeah.
But if you don't devote the time, if you're not willing to take little power hours for yourself, or do a little reinvention convention with yourself, or whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it, you're likely to push things off. And so I want to end with this thought that I think can be important for people who want to pursue something a little bit different. And that's the difference between the words urgent and important. So we
Mm.
tend to conflate the two. And something that's urgent is what I think of as what I like to call the ringing, pinging, and dinging, right? The phone is ringing, your email is pinging, somebody's standing in your door needs to talk to you, there's a child tugging on your skirt, whatever it may be. It doesn't mean that those things are important to you, right? It may be somebody else's crisis, something that's
Yeah.
important to somebody else, or somebody else's urgency. Then there's the stuff that really is important to you, right? Maybe there is a mission that you have. Maybe you would be happier if you were doing something else. Maybe you're super happy, but you just want to have more fun, or there's a different career that you'd like to have, whatever it may be. But these things are genuinely important to you. Now, if you are doing something that's super urgent to you and super important to you, you're in crisis mode, right? You're running around with your hair on fire, right? Because now this is really important to you and it's really urgent and it's got to get done in the next 5 seconds.
Right.
And I hope you're not there most of the time. So, where most people are spending their time, whether this is at work or at home or whatever it may be, is where something is super, super urgent, but it's not that important to you, right? So again, this is going back to somebody else's crisis. That
Right.
happens a lot at work, right? The client needs you, your boss needs you, whatever it may be. So it's urgent. It's got to get done right away. But at the end of the day, this is not moving your life ahead in any other way. It's moving somebody else's life ahead. And look, we get that, right? Especially those of us who are in service businesses of some kind, whether you're a coach or a lawyer, an accountant or a doctor, whatever it may be, you're serving somebody else. Where the magic is, I think, for people who want to make change, is at the intersection of what is super important to you, but is not urgent.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, let's say I'm working with somebody who wants to sell more, right? They want to bring more business into their company. That's really important, right? Especially if you're the owner of the company, or if your compensation is based on how many widgets you can sell.
Right.
It may be that you want to shift careers, you want to get a different job. These things are really important to you, but they're never urgent in any given moment. So, for example, if today I don't decide how to shift my job tomorrow, my life isn't going to fall apart tomorrow. It's going to be the same tomorrow as it is today. If I don't bring in new clients in my business isn't going to shut down tomorrow. Or even if I'm responsible for sales for somebody else, I'm not going to get fired tomorrow. The problem is you can say that every single day for the rest of your life. So you can keep putting off what's really important to you because it's not urgent in any given moment. And so I think that understanding that and then being willing to make that commitment to yourself and investment in yourself that I mentioned before, when you put those two things together, those are the keys to moving forward. Recognize that you're worth it. You're worth making the change that you want to make. The time is going to go by anyway. So now's the time to get started. And it's never going to be urgent ever in any given moment. So you can put it off forever. And so I encourage you not to do that, to make sure that you're starting today to do the things that you want to do in the future.
That's so good. And, just listening to this whole conversation, it really does boil down to that awareness that you were talking about earlier. Biggest killers to being able to progress in anything is saying phrases like "it is what it is" and "I don't have time," and all of those things. And we think it's just natural, like it's just happening, right? It just comes out of our mouth, but we're speaking curses back into our life when we do that. And to really be aware of the thoughts we're thinking and the words that we're speaking, the actions that we're taking, that it is transformative over your future.
It's transformative, and it's recognizing that sometimes we're our own worst obstacle. We're what's getting in the way. It's easy to blame outsiders. It's easy to blame outside circumstances. And listen, it's true, right? Sometimes those external obstacles are really there and they really do get in the way. But as coaches, you and I know, and look, I will speak for you as well. We both do it to ourselves too, right? This is not something that every human does this.
Right. We're not exempt.
Exactly. We're not exempt and we're not perfect. Going back to what we were talking about before, we're just aware because this is how we've been trained and this is kind of what we think about all the time. Right. And so really what gets in the way for most of us is those internal obstacles, the things the stories that we're telling ourselves that aren't true, the excuses that we're making that are holding us back and keeping us small. And so, I think that's the key is the awareness, and then just take some small action, hang around with some really cool people, fill your brain with fun stuff like this podcast or books or whatever it may be, and just go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we're ending on that because that was just pure gold. Elise, thank you so much. How can people connect with you? Are you on LinkedIn or Instagram, or where can they?
Yes, I am on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. My website is thelawyersedge.com. So if any of you are out there are lawyers or love some lawyers, I'd love to connect with you. And thanks so much, Julianne, for having me on the show.
Yes, you're welcome. Look, and if you are looking to connect with Elise, we'll be sure to link all of those in the show notes below. And if you are looking to be a part of a mastermind group, which we referenced earlier, or just get to know the Women Leaders Association a little bit better, or a chapter near you, visit womenleaderspodcast.com. Bye for now.